Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running and nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. So today on the program, very special guest. We have a guest called Syntax, and it's going to be a great interview. Really looking forward to it. You definitely want to stick around for that. And in the second part of the show, anytime allotted, we'll be doing computer and technology news, where we have a ton of stuff to talk about, including things like, the new Tesla spaceship. Well, it kind of blew its top, so that was pretty interesting. You have other things such as, I have a full list here of just tons of them, including NVIDIA's RTX new drivers and what that could mean for you. Pokémon Sword Shield, one of the best in the series ever. They're having their best launch ever. It's amazing to hear. And of course, Apple and their ridiculous words. I love Apple. I have their products. I've used them for a long time, and still, they amaze me with some of the things that they have the courage to put out there. So with that being said, everyone, first things first, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including the show notes. It's where you'll find, the live video stream, all the podcasts. Again, we are freshly on Deezer. So if you tend to use Deezer and you're like, man, I wish Computer America was on here. Well, hey, we've heard you, and you can now do that. So with that being said, everyone, again, welcome back into the program, and let's go ahead. Oh, and by the way, a ton of new reviews if you are into that kind of thing. Some of the things that, hey, maybe you've been checking out yourself, we had a chance to review. Again, computeramerica.com. Now, with that being said, now, for our interview today, we are going to be having none other than Syntax. And if you haven't heard the company, then this is going to be a great opportunity for you. And today on the show, we have none other than the CEO of America's region for the company. And hey, it's going to be a great conversation all about, a bunch of different things. And if you are a small business owner or even, part of a larger organization, I feel like this is really going to apply to you. So without any further ado, why don't we just go ahead and get into our interview. And once again, joining us is Mr. Ryan Etinson, and he is the CEO of America's region for Syntax. So Ryan, how you doing? Welcome on to Computer America.
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the discussion. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So as with most of our guests, why don't we go ahead and get some background? Because, obviously, let's hear a bit, how Syntax got its start and how you started working with the company. And then, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit of background on yourself. Have you always been in high tech? Or did you, was it kind of a gradual transition? Please, some background.
Sure. So first off, Syntax has been around since the early 1970s. It was my father, Michael Etinson, who founded and started the business. Basically, we wrote an ERP package, enterprise resource planning software, for really the oil and gas companies and apparel companies, with some good distribution management or import-export inventory management capabilities. and that application was RPG based, running on AS400s, as it was named back then. System 36, then System 38, then AS400, which turned to I-Series, etc. But essentially ran on that platform, and it was in the early days of this type of these type of softwares. And basically companies like SAP and Oracle and Microsoft only got into that business in the 80s. So we were in there early on. And it was at the time up into the mid 80s, one of the leading products for started selling pretty well across North America for really in the distribution management area, inventory management area, shipping, invoicing, selling, the order to cash process. And at the time in the mid market, JD Edwards was the largest competitor at the time. And basically what ended up happening to our company was that when AS400, when IBM decided to rebrand AS400 to I-Series, they decided to prepackage applications inside the box that the customer would just then have to turn on just by paying IBM for the rights to use it. And IBM basically had a big decision to make on which ERP to prepackage, and it was JD Edwards versus Syntax Distribution Management System. And in the end, we got out-marketed, out-hustled by JD Edwards, and decided the IBM picked JD Edwards. JD Edwards then went on to go public, and then they got acquired by PeopleSoft, which eventually got acquired by Oracle, and they went on a different path. And I think like a year or two after that happened, we were investing, $5-6 million annually into our product, and they were starting to invest $100 million, $150 million into their product. And as the years started clicking by, we saw that obviously they were catching up to us in terms of functionality and leapfrogging us in terms of technology. And we saw the writing was on the wall. So we actually decided to then, in the mid 90s, partner with JD Edwards, and we got exclusive rights to both selling and implementing JD Edwards to mid-market companies across Canada. And that was our first play as becoming a resell implementation partner. And as things scaled out, we built some really good IP to enable us to implement best business practices at a low effort. We used automation. We worked with JD Edwards development team to create the very unique and special version of JD Edwards that we're able to rapidly install and get it into smaller companies with a lot less time and effort required to do the job. And at the same time, we started building out the capability to host and manage the application. And so I guess if you flash forward now, about 8 years later, like 2005, 2006, we had a very unique offering in the marketplace where there was a partner such as ourselves that was out there selling this application in a fixed price model with best business practices, with low effort at a reduced cost, and also offering to host and manage the application so that companies would not have to buy all that infrastructure, hire people to manage the infrastructure. And our managed services offering really also allow these customers to avoid the cost of bringing in these software specialists to manage the application as well. So it was a very, very unique offering at the time. This is before it was called the cloud. Now today it's called,
right.
It's called you're running your ERP in the cloud, right? So we got in before it was called cloud, luckily, because of our expertise in both the hardware and software end of the business. And once that started clicking, we started offering the customers who were originally running their ERP on their on-premises and having their own hardware. We started offering them to do high availability or disaster recovery in our data centers, and we really started scaling the business. And I think I would say that by 2012, 2013, we were bringing in about 4 new customers per quarter onto the JD Edwards platform, into our cloud. By 2010, about 70 to 80% of our revenues were in Canada. By 2012, 2013, we flipped it, and 80% of our revenues were now in the United States. With a lot of fast-growing companies were coming onto our package based on the fact that we're able to do it at a low cost and really quickly and to get a tier one. So companies like these up and rising companies like Birchbox and Rent the Runway, and Kind Health Bars, who Soul Cycle, right? So these are these fast-growing companies that know they're growing really fast. They know they need a really good ERP system in place, but they don't have the time and the money and the effort to start sitting down and really investing in that project, both in people and time. This is a very, very unique offering for those fast-growing companies, and it kind of word of mouth went around, and we started doing really well. In 2016, we then saw that we had a really good opportunity to expand on this managed hosting business, which has now become called cloud. And we found ourselves in the hot spot. So we seeked additional investment. We brought in some private equity investment in 2016. In 2017, we made our first acquisition, which was a company called Core Services. They were similar as Syntax, but they were centered around managing and hosting customers running Oracle e-business suite. So this was another ERP system that Oracle had kind of homegrown over time through some acquisitions and some development. They built out this ERP software called Oracle e-business suite. So we were still inside the Oracle ecosystem because J.D. Edwards was now part of Oracle, and now we were able to host and manage both of Oracle's major ERP applications. And then just this year, we made two other acquisitions. One of them was a company called Emerald Cube, who was also in the J.D. Edwards ecosystem. But what they had, which was very unique, was they had the ability and had built a lot of automation and tools around bringing customers into the public cloud, specifically into AWS. So this is, with the trending going on, with the higher adoption, put mission critical applications in the public cloud, this jump started us. It would have taken us many years of investment to get to where this company, Emerald Cube, had gotten to around being able to deploy mission critical applications in public cloud. This was a great acquisition for us to further deepen us into the J.D. Edwards ecosystem, and of course to be able to get that public cloud IP and the automation and everything was tremendous. And the second acquisition we did was to buy a global company which was headquartered in Germany called FIT, and this company was similar to Syntax and Core Services. However, they were doing hosting and managing the application, the SAP application in private cloud and a little bit of public cloud in Microsoft Azure. So now we had gone global. We bought a company that was based in Germany. We had where 75% of the revenue and operations was happening in North America, so large North American presence in Europe, and presence in China. And at this point is when I took on the current role of regional CEO Americas. If I go back to my story, I've been with the company for about 25 years now. This is it was a family business at the time. So I entered into the family business after getting my MBA. At the John Molson School of Business here in Montreal. And I entered into the business, started out basically in the business intelligence division. We were a big Cognos reseller at the time. So that was very interesting to me, especially after having gone through the MBA. There was a lot of executive consulting, executive management, tool sets, etc. I enjoyed that. But then as we got into the Y2K rush, and all these companies were changing out their ERPs, and of course we were one of the companies that was benefiting from it, because not only did we have existing customers on our syntax distribution management system that needed to upgrade to the latest release to get the four-digit year field. So everyone there had to upgrade. But then you had a lot of, we had already become a big JD Edwards reseller. And so you had a lot of companies that said, okay, rather than retrofit my existing ERP application, we're going to change. So this was like a gold rush time for the ERP industry, the Y2K, the Y2K issue or non-issue, whichever you like to call it. But
it definitely became a non-issue, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember some funny interactions with taxi drivers. Like a few days before, they were heading up to the mountains. They had a, they rented a cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
They had an underground bunker. They had a year's supply of water and canned food. They were ready.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting times. And I guess so. Where I'm leaving off in the story was around the Y2K time. I decided to move into the ERP field. I saw that there was a lot of activity. I learned the JD Edwards system from the ground up, started as a consultant, so implementing systems for people, then moved into sales, then into management. And then eventually I had taken over the company with my brother at the time, who was running the technical side of our business, and both of us became co-CEOs of Syntax. And then when we went through these acquisitions, and with the last one going global, we brought on a global CEO. And so now I'm reporting into that gentleman, Christian Primo.
Mm-hmm.
And I am CEO of the Americas region, which has about 700 employees right now, spread out across. We have about 260 people in Mexico and Puebla, Mexico. We're doing operations, nearshore operations. We have a large office in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have an office in New Jersey, office in Atlanta, and an office here in Montreal. So that's the short version of my story.
Yeah, no, that was very comprehensive. It's almost like you've told that story before. And I got to say that it's very interesting listening to that story, especially as it starts, back in the 90s, because tech of most industries, like, if you run a cookie shop or something like that, the recipe for cookies doesn't really change. Tech, though, you had to make a lot of aggressive moves. You had to really, kind of see trends coming 4 or 5 years down the road, and you had to, much like your story with Oracle, you had to make, I should say, JD Power, not JD Power, the other company.
Edwards.
Yeah, that one. But you had to make some very quick and tough decisions. I mean, that can't be easy. And I guess in the field of tech, where do you kind of get that insight from? Do you, obviously you're in the industry for a long time. By now, you are probably the one that people call for advice. But before you make these big decisions, do you bring in consultants, or do you just kind of go with your gut and say, this is what it is. We're just going to do this and hope for the best. How do you make those those really big plays over the years?
That's a great question. And if you look back, every couple of years, companies in our industry have faced these big decisions. And, the easiest thing to do is just stay on course and stay what you're doing, keep your head down. But then when you lift your head up, you'll see that the industry has changed and the products and services that you were offering are outdated and you're in trouble. So it's a constant reinvention in this industry, especially, where we are at the forefront of it, and we're hosting and manage these applications for some really large companies, Restoration Hardware. We have some airlines that we're hosting and managing. We have some retail stores that we're hosting and managing, just to name a few, and some manufacturers, et cetera. I mean, I can go through the roster of companies. It's very impressive. But the point being, we have to really be on top of our game. But if we go back to these decision points, I think the first thing is you have to, if you stay close to your customers, you have a good relationship to your customers, and you have to get into their minds of what they're thinking, where they're thinking the industry is going, what they're thinking their moves are going to be, and you have to sort of stay on top of that. Then you have, of course, the suppliers. And what are they working on? What's Oracle working on? What are they developing? Where are they going next? Where do they see the industry going next? SAP, Oracle, right? So you have to, having key relationships inside there is really critical. And I can tell you one of the big decision points that we made which was in 2016, which was not so long ago. It was in June 2016.
Right.
Was Oracle decided that they're now promoting their SaaS-based ERP. It's a new ERP package that they came to market with a few years ago. So it's not JD Edwards, it's not eBusiness Suite. It's called ERP Cloud, and basically it's a SaaS-based ERP that runs on their infrastructure. It's a brand new implementation. It's a new product. And as a great partner, they were pushing us very hard to get into that business, right? They wanted their best partners to come into that business. And, they were giving us, a lot of good insight on how to get in there, how to become a top partner. They were really working hard on us to get into the program. But when we really looked at it, we said, okay, all this is offering us is basically a service-based opportunities, project-based. There's no real recurring revenue around it. Mm-hmm. And we're going to end up fighting or going to battle against these other service-based companies, a lot of them with operations in India and global, and companies are going to be trying to buy into that business. And we said, you know what, this looks like a potential, a bloodbath, right? And not only that, but we can end up investing in here, losing a lot of money, and what are we going to get out of it in the end? Just back to project-based business, which is what we used to do before we got into the hosting and managing and the cloud and all that. And so we said, this is non-strategic, and despite the fact that we've built such incredible relationships with the supplier and we're the recommended go-to partner, and they wanted us to continue being that, we walked away from that opportunity and decided to stick with what we're doing, which is hosting and managing these legacy on-prem applications like JD Edwards, eBusiness Suite, and SAP. So that was a big decision. We invested so much time and money into that relationship with the supplier that when they decided to go one direction, we basically decided to go another. But really, both companies were being self-serving in that the reason Oracle got into the business of rewriting an application, a SaaS-based application, was because they were looking and seeing it was companies like us that had hosting and managed services offering that were making that monthly recurring revenue, whereby they were more transactional, selling licenses, despite the fact they have their maintenance revenue. So they saw this recurring revenue had become the big thing, and they saw companies such as ourselves that were the ones capitalizing the most on their software. And so they decided to bring that whole thing in-house by creating an application which they would host and manage basically on behalf of the customer. So that was a big decision that just happened recently that I think was a very good one. But just to give an example of some of the things that happen every 2-3 years, we have to make this big gutsy call.
Yeah, it's and again, it just especially in the realm of technology, because it's actually very interesting that what you were doing in the 90s with setting up these this infrastructure, and how most of before the cloud everyone ran their own stuff, and not only did you have to figure out how to, let's say you have a car company, not only did you have to figure out how to make cars, but suddenly you had to also be network engineers as well and have your own an entire department dedicated to that. Now, it's like your origins and the origins of Syntax. You were well positioned 10, 15 years before this idea of in the cloud even became a thing. Do you think that having that experience, and of course, making the partners that you did, but really just knowing what companies are, what enterprise is really going to need after they move to the cloud, do you think that what you did before helped you down the line, or is it a new game every couple of years?
Oh no, we're always capitalizing on what we've done before. That's for sure. Because the only reason we're good at hosting and managing these applications in the cloud is because we implemented these applications, and so the specialists that were at one time consultants implementing and consulting and helping these customers configure and set up these applications are now managing it for them. And the only reason that we're on the infrastructure side is we're as strong as we are is when as a reseller and implementation partner back in the day, a lot of other companies just say, oh, if you need your infrastructure, just call Dell or just call IBM. They bring in another partner to do the infrastructure, but we did the infrastructure piece ourselves as well. So again, what we're doing today is capitalizing on knowledge that we were gaining, years ago or decades ago. So 100% everything that we're doing is capitalizing on past experiences and past knowledge base for sure. That's the only way you're going to be really an expert at what you do, is having a longevity and a track record. And then when you're moving into different sub-industries within the industry or different offerings within the same industry, as long as you're capitalizing and utilizing the same strengths and knowledge base, then, the expertise kind of follows you.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
And sorry to cut in here real quick, but for anyone out there watching the video portion, we actually have your website up, and we're looking at, I thought maybe we'd get into some of the different services that you offer, because, we actually talk about these kinds of things in our, because we're also a consumer-based show, but we talk about this, kind of from the consumer perspective of, this company had a breach, this company was hit by ransomware, this company did X, Y, and Z, and, it affected so many systems, it's going to take so much money to redo it. When I hear about, anywhere from like the National Health Services over in the UK to the US government, Veteran Affairs and things like that, I think they were hit with one. I think like Tampa, Florida, like municipal governments have been getting hit with these. One of these in particular that actually, two of them. First one is enterprise cloud security. Why doesn't everyone have this from you? And the second one is disaster recovery, because if for some reason someone clicked an email and the whole thing went kaflooey, disaster recovery, no one seems to have that kind of thing implemented. So I guess my roundabout question with this is that, as far as the industry goes, how has cloud security, how has disaster recovery, some of these managed services that you've been doing for, a number of years, how well prepared is the industry for today's, kind of security risk and challenges?
It's a great question, and I hate to use this analogy, but it's kind of like a little bit like 9/11. Like, the airlines only reacted after something happened, right? Despite the fact that there was always the threats, there was always low security. It was like, a disaster waiting to happen. It's kind of the same thing with security. There's not enough companies are taking it seriously enough, and you find that it's only after they get hit, even with something small, do they then invest in security. This is not to say all companies, but I'm saying not enough companies. And for us, anybody who comes into our cloud, we're just locking it down. So we're putting on, endpoint security. I mean, we have monitoring on the database, but like, we have a tremendous amount, multi-layered security over all of our customers' environments. Thankfully, to date, we haven't suffered a breach, but it's always something that's concerning, and it's always something that we try our best to stay ahead of. So we're doing that on behalf of the customers that we host and manage. But security is one of the prime reasons that a customer would give up their data, give up their services, give up the hosting, give up all of that whole, as you said, right now they have network engineers on staff and database engineers on staff, and they better get a security team on staff and all these things. So that's one of the reasons they're giving it up to companies such as ourselves, because we're, investing so heavily in security and making sure that our customers stay clean, don't suffer a breach of any kind. But it is definitely something that is concerning, because it can come from, there's certain things we can't control. So for instance, if a user clicks on a ransomware and gives up their password, you can't control that, right?
Right.
But it's definitely something that's concerning the industry, and I think I'm agreeing with you that it's just not taken seriously enough across the board, and companies need to be investing heavier in it for sure.
I just get a little disheartened when I hear or when I have to cover these stories, for our day-to-day show, and so often though it's not even like it was a mastermind of hackers that you'd see in a Hollywood movie. It's like Facebook left 300 million passwords in an unencrypted server somewhere with no password, and yeah, plain text everywhere. Whoever wants it can have it. Like it's very simple. It's almost like management of just I don't know if that's like data. It seems like just very basic sanitary procedures, like just make sure everything's encrypted, make sure everything has a password, make sure that any mission critical information is not held in servers that are not owned and operated by your company. Just very simple things seem to be the big kind of sticklers for these large breaches.
Yeah, for sure. And the biggest danger is the human element, right? So you can have some Facebook employee who happens to have access to that data file because, I don't know, he's a database engineer or something, for whatever reason, and copy paste or a print out and left on a desk. I mean, it's typically a human error that causes it, and it's to lock all this down. It's an effort. It's an effort that has to be done.
I will say that just kind of a personal anecdote that I tried to download a virus because one of my contacts for another company, we just got finished talking the day before, the day after, he sent me a zip file, and I was like, well, let's see what that is. And luckily, every security thing that I have in Gmail and all that kind of stuff, kind of really said, dude, stop it. You're being really stupid right now. So I didn't do anything. And then about an hour later, he sent out an email saying, sorry, I was compromised. Please disregard any emails. And I was like, man, if it weren't for the services that I use, I would have very blindly and purposefully ran into trouble. So... yeah. And I wouldn't consider myself a professional, but I'm around this stuff. Like I'm at least informed enough to know that I shouldn't do that. But I did.
For sure. I mean, you look at it like, so, every 3 to 6 months, my mother-in-law asked me to, can I help fix her computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she'll hand me the computer, and you'll open Internet Explorer, Edge, or Safari, whatever you're using, Chrome, and you'll see 20 taskbars, and all that's left, there's barely any screen space. They're asking, right? All these questions pop up. You should have to install it. Don't install it. Click here. Okay to install, right? And you're at least somewhat computer savvy and almost clicked onto a virus. My point is, you can only imagine what's going on out there.
Yeah, you can only imagine what's happening with these services. So, and I know that we're a little crunched on time, and I apologize for that, but I did want to, real quick, if you just have a couple more minutes, talk about where you see your industry evolving to. Obviously, the cloud has become, not even a buzzword, not even something that, is coming, system as a service and just everything being hosted offsite and with someone else. That is the way of things. It's much harder to bring the whole system down. You are secure in a lot of you're very unsecure in a few ways, but you're much more secure when you hire a company such as yourself to really manage a lot of these services. The cloud has dominated. Where do you think Syntax is going next? Where do you think the industry is going next?
Okay, so that's a good question. So first off, we have a couple things at play. So the software manufacturers now are smart enough, like I said, like Oracle is doing, was to start creating new applications whereby they are hosting and managing these applications. So like a Salesforce.com, for instance, where you're signing up, you're paying Salesforce directly to use their software. Their downside to these types of applications is when Salesforce decides to upgrade the application to the next version, everybody gets upgraded all at once, and you have to retest, and maybe some of the configurations you did no longer work, and there's some retraining to do. So you're kind of at the beck and call of the software manufacturer, but that's kind of where the industry is going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a software as a service. For your movie, for for the bulk of us who use Netflix for their movies and TV, when Netflix decides to upgrade their app, everybody gets the upgrade regardless if you like the old user interface, right? So that's kind of the software as a service market, but that's where the industry is going. Less tailored, less customizations, more generic use, everyone using the same version. The problem is every company has like a secret sauce, which makes them special, and some either unique business process. They're doing something unique, which keeps them in business, which makes them have healthier margins, which allows them to grow. And that's where the tailorization of the ERP software has to happen. So it's been a challenge for these manufacturers to get some of the better known, more established, larger companies onto those platforms. So now what you have left with is you have all of these customers. Probably, if I look at the Oracle ecosystem in SAP in North America alone, approximately 50,000 customers who are running the legacy applications, JD Edwards, or Oracle e-Business Suite, and SAP, and there's only about 10% of them that are using a company such as ourselves and managed hosting provider to manage and host their applications for them. Now, every day there's more and more adoption, but there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for companies such as ourselves inside the existing market to grow our businesses. Furthermore, companies are looking today more towards moving into the public cloud. So not putting it on our infrastructure, but putting in AWS or Microsoft infrastructure, Google Clouds coming to place. So now there's more, those companies are investing heavier in the ability to host and manage these mission critical applications. And so it's critical for companies such as ourselves to offer choice. You want it in public cloud, you want it in private cloud, maybe hybrid cloud. So maybe some of the applications are sitting in private cloud, some of them are in public cloud, and it's up to us to create a user experience for these customers. You know, I give an example, a portal where they're in one Syntax portal and all of their workloads are visible to them on one single screen, regardless of where they're residing. Could be some in Microsoft, some in Amazon, some in Syntax's data center. So for us, it's building that customer experience, and also automation is critical because it's labor intensive. So the more we can automate the mundane tasks, we get better reliability, better safety, but of course we get reduction in costs over time, which we can then pass on to the customer. So that's really, it's customer experience, multi-cloud, multi-ERP, and of course, building out our IP and automation. That's what we're up to right now.
That all and that sounds just like your typical customer that wants it custom made but generic, that they know how to use it instantly and they want it right away, so do it cheaply. Now that's very, very good kind of analysis of this industry. And Ryan, I really don't want to take any more of your time, but this has been a great look into ERP services. And man, just like, this is an industry that we don't get to talk a lot about here on the show, but I'm really happy that you were able to join us and talk about this. So if people want to find out more, of course, we're going to have a link to syntax.com in the show notes, but where else can they go, or is that the best place?
That's definitely the best place to go. Yes, syntax.com. That's where the bulk of our information. I mean, we're also on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all that stuff, but the website's probably the best place.
All right. Yep. We'll throw a link in there. And everyone, once again, we've been talking to the CEO of the Americas region for Syntax. And of course, Ryan, thank you so much for coming here on the program. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. So, like I said, now we're going to do computer and technology news. There we go. So I think for our first story today, and we have a lot of great ones, I think we're going to do, something fun. And Pokemon Sword and Shield, I can't think of anything more fun than Pokemon. I mean, it's much more than Pokemon Go, even though that's been the biggest thing ever. But hey, Pokemon Sword and Shield, it's the latest iteration, if you don't know, of the famed Pokemon franchise. There has been a lot of controversy around the internet And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to really do the story, was that there's this mentality that if the internet doesn't like it, then it's not good. Or if the internet is upset, then the world needs to be upset. It's almost like the internet is indicative of, things that are actually happening. And this goes for so many things, especially for video games. The communities around video games become like this little echo chamber where they will voice how upset they are, and they are going to boycott something, or they're not going to purchase something. And then lo and behold, turns out that, their community of 10,000, 100,000 people really doesn't even hold a candle to the millions upon millions of people who actually enjoy that thing. This happens with politics, of course. Not going to get into that one, but it absolutely does happen. It also happens with, technology, where, tech journalists and people who talk about tech can get really adamant that, this iteration is just, AMD is just the worst, and their latest graphics card is just going to bomb the whole company, and blah, blah, blah. And in reality, hey, they're still making good products, and they're going to be okay. So I really want to do the story, and again, just kind of congratulations to Pokemon for doing this. Pokemon Sword and Shield, again, the latest iteration, had the best-selling launch of the series. That's right, 6 million copies of the game were sold during the launch weekend, saying that the latest pair of Nintendo Pokemon series debuted for the Switch this past week, and as expected, the titles were already successful in terms of sales. And today, Nintendo announced that the company had sold more than 6 million units between the two versions of the game worldwide, and 2 million of these copies were purchased in the US alone the first 2 days, making it the highest grossing Pokemon launch yet. And for those of you who are not that familiar with Pokemon, they say two. There's Sword and Shield. You get one or the other, and there's some of the Pokemon are locked behind which version that you get. You have to trade and do that kind of thing. But overall, it's for the majority of it going to be the same story and the same thing. So it really doesn't matter which version that you get. But yeah, they said that fans have been clamoring for Sword and Shield leading up to their release. The game marks the first mainline entry into the Nintendo console, which is why it was going to do so well. The Nintendo Switch is one of the best-selling Nintendo consoles ever. So of course, one of the most famous franchises having one of their first games on one of their best-selling consoles, yeah, this was going to be huge. And they said that with the ability to play on console-quality games both on TV and portable mode, Switch unified these two markets into one platform. And of course, there's a bit more to the article here about numbers and sales and that kind of thing that we won't get into. But yeah, some of the controversy I was mentioning earlier wasn't mentioned in the article. The controversy came from the fact that up until this point, every time a new Pokemon was released, the Pokedex at least would allow you to collect all the Pokemon from previous games and kind of port them forward. And this time, no, they were excluded. And of course, it's an online game. They can push content updates and things like that. So I'm sure that they will add additional Pokemon as time goes on through either microtransactions, expansions, things like that, which is all new territory for Pokemon. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, that was some of the hubbub. So there you go. So there's that story. Let's see. We have time for, hey, we're doing pretty good on time. Lots of other stories. How about we talk about YouTube? And this is something that affects us here at Computer America, so definitely want to get this in. But this affects a lot of people, and it really shows that YouTube is, if nothing else, at least trying. YouTube is set to update harassment and gaming policies and clarify changes to kids' content. And trust me, I've noticed that when we upload the show to YouTube, we've recently had to start answering the question, was this made for kids? And that was a question we've never been asked before. And, some of the shows that we do, like we just had Moshi Twilight on, which is, of course, a show and an app designed for kids, but of course the show itself was for the parents of kids and, having a conversation with the CEO of the company. So of course, none of our content is made for kids, but some content that is made for kids is actually very strange. And it's, is this idea that this whole YouTube for kids and YouTube and, what's acceptable in one place, what's acceptable in another. And of course, you need very clear and distinct guidelines. And up until this point, YouTube has just been just one giant pool of content, and it was up to either people who work for YouTube or an algorithm to sort through what was designed for kids and what wasn't, and there wasn't really a way to separate the two, and that led to a lot of controversy, a lot of videos that were being shown to kids that should not have been shown to anyone, let alone kids. So let's go ahead and get into this. YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki, and I'm sure I butchered that awfully. She, of course, released today. The executive addresses a number of changes to the YouTube policies, including the recent FTC mandated rules for kids content and to have alternately confused and of course infuriated video creators, as well as forthcoming policies around harassment, gaming videos, and other things. On the latter, the CEO of the company said that the company is now in the process of developing a new harassment policy and was talking to creators about the need to be addressed. She did not give an ETA for the rollout, but the creators would be posted when the changes were finalized. YouTube also responded to creator concerns over policy around gaming videos that included violence, saying, quote, "We've heard loud and clear that our policies need to differentiate between real-world violence and gaming violence. We have a policy update coming soon that will do just that. The new policy will have fewer restrictions for violence in gaming, but maintain our high bar for protected audiences from real-world violence." And that's a very clear distinction, because if you think about, let's just say, one of the latest Mortal Kombats, that is just, and I don't want to say disgustingly, I want to say expertly gross. That is expertly graphic and violent, and it's expertly horrible. It's a lot of fun, but of course you have to, as an individual, know that it's the difference between a video game and reality. Because if I saw any of the impossible things, but anything I saw in Mortal Kombat in real life, oh my God, I wouldn't open my eyes for a long time. Those are horrible, horrible things that happen to a person in real life. But there's a very clear distinction between gaming and real life. And so that's why they're, hopefully going to, they can't just say no one is allowed to be shot because, in video games or otherwise, because I get the or otherwise. I get in real life. You don't want that kind of content on YouTube. But of course, when you think about in video games, that's more than half the video games out there. That's that's a huge chunk of their market. And of course, content creators who need to provide videos for their audience, and it has to happen. So the company said that it's now working to match edgier content with advertisers who may be interested in it, like a marketer who wants to promote an R-rated movie, for example. The letter briefly addressed the creator uproar over kids' content and promised for more clarity. In September, YouTube reached a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission over its violation of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which required it to pay a $170 million fine and set into place a series of rules for creators to comply with. These rules require creators to mark videos that are directed at kids, and this in turn will limit data protection, put an end to personalized ads on kids' content, and disable comments and reduce the revenues creators save. Saying that creators will also lose out on a number of key to features, including click-through info cards, end screens, notification functions, and the community tab. These things happen. So YouTube creators said that they don't have enough clarity around where to draw the line between content that's made for kids and content that may attract kids. Obviously, if you have something, let's say Fortnite, it's still a massively popular game. But if you have Fortnite, then hey, kids would of course be drawn to a person playing that game who may be cursing, swearing, that kind of thing. It may not be it may not be evident that the person making the content assumes that the audience is able to handle curse words, maybe 16 and up, but a 9-year-old who's really into Fortnite might find the video because it's maybe one of the more popular videos. It's just going to happen. So they said that, for example, family vlog channels and some gaming videos may appeal to kids and adults alike, and if the FTC decides a creator is in violation, they can be held liable for future COPPA violations, and that YouTube's new policy and content labeling system is in place. YouTube's advice to creators, saying consult a lawyer. It has, and that's the end of it. YouTube said, yeah, you should consult a lawyer. That's not a good way to build communities on YouTube, through threats of legal action from the United States government. That does not lead people to kind of say, oh, okay, I'm going to fully embrace this platform and I'm going to, kind of do X, Y, Z. No, that's a very scary proposition that, what you may be doing may be taken wrongly. And of course, hey, you may have to deal with it. So they said in today's letter, the CEO acknowledged that the fallout of these changes, but doesn't offer any further clarity, only promises of updates to come, saying that we know there are so many questions about how this is going to affect creators, and we'll have more updates along the way. Let's see, so what else does she have here? She also points out a long thread on the YouTube community forum where many questions about the system are being answered, like the policy's reach, what's changing, how and when to mark the content for kids, and more. The forum's Q&A also addresses some of the questions that keep coming up about all ages content, including some example scenarios. Creators, of course, have read through these materials and say they still don't understand how to figure out the video for kids or not. So obviously, you don't want to err on the side of caution at the risk of reduced income, because many of these people who make videos, they do depend on YouTube almost solely as as an income. That's your livelihood. So that being said, the rise of a kid-friendly YouTube has had a range of negative consequences. YouTube had to shut down comments after finding a ring of child predators on videos with kids. For instance, that was one of those that I knew about, and I'm surprised that it took YouTube so long to act on that. That's certain family vlogs and things like that. There was a coordinated effort by a group of individuals. Very, very seedy and distasteful. So parents roped in their kids to the family business before the children even knew what being on public on the internet was. Some young stars have been put to work more than should be legally allowed due to the lack of child labor laws on the internet. There's even been child abuse at the hands of parents. Children watching videos, meanwhile, have been marketed to without their understanding, addicted to consumerism by toy unboxing and playtime videos. One of those is actually a kid who puts out like a video like every single day. He has millions of subscribers. He has one of the largest channels on YouTube, and his parents have him just unboxing things. Honestly, it's almost like a gambling addiction, just seeing these kids, consume these things. And the kids are targeted with personalized ads. Kids YouTube was overdue for reining in. Completely agree. So the letter addresses a few other key issues, including the launch of the new Creator Studio and the latest EU Copyright Article 17, which is now being translated into local law. They cheer some of the changes to policies, including the one that secures liability protections when YouTube makes its best effort to match copyright material with the rights owners. And they address the growing concern over creator burnout by reminding video creators to take a break and practice self-care, adding that it won't harm their business by doing so. In fact, YouTube scoured its data for the past 6 years and found that, on average, channels both large and small had more views when they returned than they had right before they left. And so there's a lot to that, and of course you see the first video in a long time of your favorite content creator and you say, oh, let's see what he's been up to, or let's say what she's been up to, or something like that. But the entire middle time, they've not been earning an income, and it hurts their business. It really does. That's not really something that YouTube can fix, but it definitely does hurt the business either way. So with that being said, that's the end of that article, and I found that very interesting. So obviously YouTube is, when you have to deal with as much content as YouTube has to deal with, where you're talking millions of hours of video uploaded every day, with so many different communities and so many different people and interests and things like that, being able to have just a singular law put in place that everyone follows and everything's going to be okay, not going to be very effective. But at the same time, they have to try to do something very close to that, because transparency leads to following the rules, leads to people who are happy with the platform. They just want to be able to create the content the best that they can and know that they're not going to get in trouble with YouTube, the US government, so on and so forth. So there you go. There's the whole story about YouTube. So I think we have time for just one more story. And I wanted this one. Apple, like I said before, Apple is a great company. They make amazing products. I love the design, the software, everything just works. It's fashionable, it's trendy. But boy, do they say some stupid stuff. Okay, so Apple says it's lost money on repairs over the last decade. Ridiculous. Daniel Cooper, and it says replacing your iPhone's battery is too difficult for users to do on their own. Now, as someone who has been replacing their own iPhone batteries ever since I've gotten iPhones, because, replacing batteries, replacing cracked screens, replacing broken cameras, replacing water damage, replacing anything like that, it may seem like a lot of work. And don't get me wrong, you have to watch like a 20-minute YouTube video. It's crazy the amount of background knowledge you have to have on this, but you have to go out, buy like $15, $20 worth of equipment, including little screwdrivers with specialized heads, and then you have to watch a YouTube video, and then you just do it and, use a replacement part you bought offline. Trust me, it's hard, but it's not impossible. It's one of the more complicated things. Like it's harder than making a sandwich. It's easier than running a business. There's a middle ground there. So with that being said, the right to repair movement is mad as heck at companies as companies work to prevent owners from doing basic repairs on their own devices. Again, something that I truly hold dear. One of the biggest targets is, of course, Apple, which is accused of going out of its way to make repairs as difficult as possible. One of those, by the way, there's a link in the article. Highly recommend you go out to Engadget and check that out. But I believe the article, without looking at it, would have something to do with specialized heads, would have to do with a lot of plastic bits that that are mold injected and will crack very easily. A lot of glue and adhesive as opposed to screws and tightening everything down that way. Essentially, just making it harder for a person to repair a device, because the idea of repairing is not as profitable as replacing to a company like Apple. So they said that Apple's responses to the antitrust committee were produced by the company's VP and make for very interesting reading, especially in the section regarding the implication that Apple goes out of its way to block repairs, forcing people into its own stores to charge eye-watering rates to do so instead. Because obviously, I could have sent my iPhone into Apple, waited a week, and gotten my screen replaced for like $140. Or I could have done it. I could have did it at home, and I did do it at home with my own tool set that I now permanently own for like $25. It's not that hard. And they say that's so according to Andir, who says that Apple's actually losing money on its repair business. For each year since 2009, the cost of providing repair services has exceeded the revenue generated by repairs. And for that reason, any protectiveness regarding repair services is to ensure repairs on the complex devices are safe and reliable. And the article makes a good point. This does seem odd, especially since it's been caught charging $1,200 for a repair that a third party fixed for just $75. And replacing an iPhone X display, which is of course out of warranty, cost $300 through Apple, but $170 through another company like iPhone Dock New York City, or of course even cheaper if you do it yourself. It's likely that the overall cost of Apple's repair bill is also distorted because of the cut price repairs it's had to offer recently and its wider recall programs. Apple is just completely off base, and I truly mean this. Like I said, I truly do enjoy the products and things like that, but this part of the company is very out of touch. The VP also added that the untrained people attempting to repair the iOS device might cause what's termed as a safety event. He cites an example where a loose screw could damage the battery, which could cause overheating or a fire. And there's some merit to the argument, given that the headlines that follow would concern the exploding iPhone, not the fact that it was improperly repaired, and that had to do with a bad battery that the iPhone was using that they had to recall, not anyone's third-party independent repairs. So they mentioned that the rollout of its Best Buy Repair partnership and its new system to verify independent third parties as correctives here, these people will have access to genuine Apple parts and repair manuals and will be able to offer the same services that authorized technicians can, which was a huge win. Being able to take it to anyone other than, or just someone else other than Apple, really open up the market and should drive prices down. So with that being said, well, and of course, the problem that advocates have with that is that they're concerned that Apple is being fair there because Apple gets to determine who gets to repair their phones. Like, they're still controlling the market, even if they aren't completely controlling the market. So with that being said, we are just flat out of time. Everyone, I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I want to say have a great day. We'll catch you here tomorrow, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Everyone, have a great one. Bye-bye.